Jennifer Isaacs. I have been seeing some people out there believing in opinions of an us versus them kind of mentality, or just that black and white view of the world. Those who start following cults and become bigots and aggressive extremist activists where they were not beforehand. Why do so many people believe in stereotypes, have prejudices, and agree with things and trust without seemingly giving any effort in critical thinking? Why would people stop thinking and stop using a higher moral ground? Or at least, how does that happen in the first place? I've done a lot of looking into this particular subject because it's been of great interest to me for my own recovery from Scientology and, of course, in critical thinking. This is a thing. This is definitely a thing that's talked about a lot. It has to do with, black and white thinking, or all or nothing thinking, or what they've called splitting is another term for this. It has to do with the flight or fight response that all animals have, right? And that is sort of the ultimate in black and white. It's either you take off or you fight, right? Black, white. And that is a very instinctive gut level sort of thing. And I think with human beings, it happens when our emotions take over our thought processes, right? Because there's intelligence, right? Which is how much you know, how much you can think, how you process things. But then there's rational thinking and skepticism and critical thinking, right? And these are two different things. People often notice or talk about how, otherwise normal and intelligent people get caught up in cult thinking or black and white thinking or crazy ideas or woo or all kinds of words that we use for basically non-skeptical thinking or not thinking. I think a more accurate way of putting it is not thinking in shades of gray, or thinking in gradations, or that there's levels to anything. Hubbard even talked about it in Scientology. He called it gradient scales. You have scales of things, more or less of something versus absolutes. And I'd have a little bit more respect for the guy if he didn't push an authoritarian, totalitarian sort of system of thought on people, even though he, sort of talked about this sort of thing. The fight or flight response is an instinctive, gut level, emotional response, and it has to do with survival. And when people emotionally connect an issue, whether that issue has to do with their religious beliefs or their political beliefs or some other, sports. I mean, some people really get wrapped up in sports, right? And subjects having to do with something that they consider very close to or aligned with or very at the core of their own survival or their family's survival, their intimate survival, right? Their emotions turn on, and that gut level, this has to do with whether I live or die, right? That's the fight or flight thing. When it comes down to that kind of thinking, the critical band of the brain, I guess, I don't know where it is exactly, but that band just shuts down because the person is under the impression, rightly or wrongly, that they need to make snap decisions. They need to decide on a thing and they need to stick to it. And they've established this connection in their thinking that this subject matter or this particular topic is connected to whether they live or die. And it really, like at a core level, right? Religion, of course, goes right into this because religion feeds on the fear of death. And that's where religion gets a lot of its power from, is our uncertainty and our fear of what's going to happen after our body dies. And whether anything happens to us, whether we still go on, that sort of thing. That's very core to the question of our own survival. Scientology and other religions feed on that fear and use that, and when they use it and abuse it, then they are, then people, it's pretty rough when that happens. But in terms of the beliefs, the religious beliefs, right, that's really really, you can see the connection there between a person's survival and their religious beliefs, right? Political beliefs also get into this because you're talking about economics, you're talking about social issues that people feel very passionately about because they feel that, this particular issue, taxation, for example, is going to affect them directly as to whether they're going to be able to live tomorrow, whether they're going to be able to feed themselves, feed their kids, right? Keep living, have a roof over their heads, that sort of thing. That's directly connected to survival. And so it tends to be on those subjects, I think, that you find the most rigorous kind of black and white thinking, right? The least amount of a person's willingness to consider another side or consider alternative viewpoints or things like that, right? Is when it gets to those survival core issues. And I think that the way to, of course, try to break down the walls that people put up around themselves about those issues is to show them or somehow demonstrate to them that, hey, it's not live or die. It's not, they're going to keep going. And maybe if they considered an alternative point of view, maybe it wouldn't kill them, And we even have that in our language. Hey, it won't kill you to look, sort of thing. But I think that's where that intense kind of thinking comes from, because it's not really very, there's not a lot of thinking going on with that. It's very yes, no, good, bad, right? Sort of thing. And I think that's the basic explanation on why that happens with people and how it starts, is you convince somebody. Like if you want to get somebody into black and white thinking, you convince them that the subject under discussion or the topic is something that is very, very, very important, and and that they're intimately connected to. And if you can convince somebody of that, which is a sales job, you get a gradual series of agreements until they have come all the way into your way of thinking on this topic. And once they've accepted that and kind of linked up to it and made it a part of themselves, then they get really, really, it's easy for them to be very, very passionate about it and stop thinking because they've already made up their mind or whatever, and that's how that goes down.